Welcome back for part 2 of the philosophy of Consciousism. Let's begin. Epistemology: how consciousness knows. In Consciousism, consciousness is not merely a passive container that accumulates knowledge, it is the very act of knowing itself. Awareness does not require intermediaries, no inner observer, no cognitive apparatus, or external validation to apprehend its own existence. It is self-luminous, revealing itself by virtue of being. This idea situates Consciousism in dialogue with both Eastern and Western philosophical traditions. Advaita Vedanta, for instance, speaks of Svayaprakasa, the self-revealing nature of awareness, while Husserl's phenomenology describes consciousness as self-giving, where every perception carries with it a pre-reflective awareness of itself. In both cases, consciousness is not a passive recipient but an inherently active, self-manifesting phenomenon, one that contains within itself the capacity to know, to generate reality, and to reflect upon its own presence. From this perspective, knowledge is not fundamentally a relation between two separate entities, a mind and an external world, but a modulation within a singular underlying field of awareness. When consciousness attends to a latent possibility within its informational substrate, that potential crystallizes into actuality. This epistemic collapse mirrors, metaphorically, the measurement problem in quantum physics, where the act of observation resolves a superposition into a specific outcome. In phenomenological terms, this is the fulfillment of intentionality. Perception and cognition are not passive reflections of reality, but active realizations within consciousness itself. The act of knowing, therefore, is simultaneously an act of creating. Each moment of awareness is a point at which the infinite possibilities contained within consciousness are filtered, shaped, and made manifest. Consciousism builds on Franz Brentano's insight that all consciousness is about something, that it is intrinsically intentional, but goes further by framing intentionality as a causal, creative force. To attend to something is not merely to notice it, it is to select it, to bring it forth into actuality. Each act of focus is a microcosmic act of creation, tuning the vibrational frequency of the conscious field and precipitating one temporal possibility from an infinite array of potentials. In practical terms, the thoughts one cultivates, the attention one gives, and the perspectives one embraces are not merely mental events but formative acts with consequences that ripple through experience and reality itself. This understanding elevates attention to the status of a formative principle. Consciousness does not passively reflect reality, but actively structures it. Consequently, the common aphorism "belief shapes reality" ceases to be a metaphorical or mystical claim and becomes an ontological statement. Mind is not an epiphenomenon of the universe, but a component of its very syntax. Intentionality, in this sense, is the physics of the subjective. Each focused thought and each act of discernment has the power to mold experience, and by extension, the unfolding of reality itself. To think, to perceive, to care, to focus, each is a form of cosmic participation, a way in which consciousness manifests its own potential through the fabric of lived reality. While a solitary consciousness may generate a rich and complex private world, the stability and consistency of shared reality depend upon the alignment of multiple conscious loci. Through communication, empathy, and mutual perception, distinct centers of awareness synchronize their temporal subjection, co-stabilizing a coherent common projection. This resonance among multiple subjectivities generates what is called objectivity. Objectivity is not a property inherent to things themselves, but the emergent product of many consciousnesses vibrating in phase. When individuals converse, collaborate, or simply observe one another with attentive empathy, they reinforce patterns in the shared field of awareness, stabilizing what is perceived as consistent, predictable reality. Science, conversation, art, and culture are large-scale coherence networks, structures of shared attention that reinforce particular patterns within the conscious field. Even social norms, laws, and ethical systems can be understood as manifestations of intersubjective resonance, stabilizing specific temporal and perceptual outcomes across the field of human awareness. Every shared ritual, from the smallest greeting to the grandest ceremony, participates in this synchronization. Music, for example, resonates precisely because multiple individuals attune their consciousness to similar temporal patterns. Similarly, mathematics and logic function not merely as abstract systems, but as shared scaffolds within consciousness that enable coherent navigation of the world. Consciousism acknowledges the inherent perspectival nature of all knowing. Absolute objectivity, the so-called view from nowhere, is an aspirational ideal rather than a practical reality. Every act of perception, reflection, and understanding is colored by the particular locus of consciousness from which it arises. However, this limitation is not a deficiency but a direction for epistemic growth. By expanding identification, by empathically incorporating multiple viewpoints simultaneously, consciousness approximates universality. The practice of empathy is thus not merely moral but epistemological. By inhabiting perspectives beyond one's own, consciousness extends its reach, accessing patterns and truths that remain hidden within narrower fields of attention. Knowledge grows by increasing the capacity to inhabit perspectives beyond one's own. To understand more is, in a profound sense, to become more. The expansion of empathy, insight, and perspective is the engine of epistemic evolution. The broader and deeper the engagement of consciousness with diverse loci of experience, the richer and more robust the shared understanding of reality becomes. In this framework, epistemology is inseparable from ethics and ontology, for the act of knowing is simultaneously an act of becoming and a gesture of alignment with the universal field of awareness. The implications of this view are profound. Education, for instance, can be understood not as the transmission of static facts, but as the cultivation of attentional skill, the training of consciousness to perceive, select, and bring forth new possibilities. Art is no longer merely decorative or expressive, it is a conscious shaping of experience that communicates across multiple fields of awareness. Scientific inquiry is not the quest for an independent, objective world, but a cooperative tuning of consciousness toward patterns that can be stabilized and replicated. Even interpersonal relationships gain a metaphysical dimension, as empathy and shared attention become means of co-creating stability in the field of lived experience. Furthermore, Consciousism suggests that the evolution of consciousness itself is a participatory event. Humanity does not merely observe the universe, it co-creates it, moment by moment, through attention, intentionality, and intersubjective coherence. The cosmos and consciousness are not separate domains, they are aspects of a single unfolding process, where the structure of reality emerges from the dynamic modulation of awareness. Every act of knowing is simultaneously an act of forming, an ethical gesture, and a creative contribution to the unfolding of existence. In this light, the act of becoming conscious assumes the weight of responsibility. Each choice of focus, each expansion of perspective, each act of empathy reverberates through the field of consciousness, shaping not only personal experience but the shared reality that others inhabit. Consciousness is simultaneously self-revealing, creative, relational, and ethical. It is the lens, the brush, and the canvas through which the world comes into being. Understanding this, practicing attentive and expansive awareness, and participating consciously in the intersubjective field are not optional philosophical exercises, they are the very conditions of a coherent and meaningful existence. Cosmology, the conscious universe. In Consciousism, the universe is not an external arena where consciousness happens to reside. Rather, it is a reflexive event occurring within consciousness itself. From this perspective, the cosmos is not an inert stage but a living process of awareness reflecting upon itself. The Big Bang, commonly understood as the origin of space and time, can be reinterpreted as the first act of self-differentiation of consciousness. It marks the primordial separation of observer and observed, a moment in which awareness became aware of itself. Space and time emerge as the dimensions in which this reflexivity unfolds, providing the stage for the ongoing play of differentiation and integration. Every subsequent cosmic event, from the formation of galaxies to the emergence of life, can be understood as a continuation of this self-reflective process. In this view, the universe is not a collection of objects but a dynamic conversation of awareness with itself, continuously exploring, organizing, and reorganizing its own potential. Physical laws, therefore, are not arbitrary impositions upon a pre-existing universe. They are the grammar of conscious experience, the rules by which awareness structures its manifestations. Gravitation expresses unity, the tendency of all things to form coherent structures within the conscious field. Electromagnetism expresses relation, the subtle interplay and communication between entities. Quantum mechanics, with its inherent uncertainty and superpositions, expresses freedom within unity, the potentiality that lies within every act of observation and selection. David Bohm's concepts of implicate and explicate order resonate deeply here. The implicate order is the enfolded hidden structure of consciousness itself, while the explicate order is the manifest universe we experience. The cosmos is thus both hidden and revealed, an unfolding narrative in which consciousness continually articulates itself. Physics is no longer in opposition to spirituality. It is the language through which the universe writes its own story. Mathematical equations, far from being mere abstractions, become the medium by which consciousness expresses patterns, structures, and relationships within its own field. Metaphors from modern physics provide fertile ground for understanding the conscious universe. Loop quantum gravity, with its quantization of space-time, mirrors the discrete moments of awareness that compose lived experience. Each quantum of space-time corresponds to a unit of perception, a building block of conscious reality. The holographic principle, which suggests that all the information within a volume of space can be encoded on its boundary, parallels the way consciousness compresses vast potential into manifest reality. The observer effect, often cited in quantum mechanics, aligns naturally with the principle of intentional selection in Consciousism. The act of observing is itself an act of creation. In this framework, physics does not contradict spiritual insight, it formalizes it, offering metaphors and models that illuminate the processes of awareness and manifestation. Evolution, both biological and cultural, can be seen as the universe learning to perceive itself more intricately through increasing complexity. Atoms form molecules, molecules organize into cells, cells develop into organisms, and complex organisms give rise to brains and societies. Each stage represents an intensification of reflexivity, a greater capacity for consciousness to observe itself through more complex structures. Life is not an incidental phenomenon, it is a mechanism for the universe to explore, differentiate, and understand itself. Humanity, with its sophisticated cognitive capacities, language, technology, and social structures, represents a particularly acute stage of this evolutionary self-reflexivity. Our existential anxieties, moral dilemmas, and search for meaning are not random but manifestations of a self-aware universe struggling to recognize its own essence. Civilizations, art, philosophy, and science are all expressions of this deeper cosmic process. Time within Consciousism is the motion of consciousness, the ongoing flow through which awareness experiments with form and distinction. The teleology of evolution is not merely survival or proliferation, but the eventual reintegration of all temporal slices into a timeless, unified awareness. Mystical experiences, in which the ordinary flow of time dissolves and the self appears to merge with a greater whole, offer glimpses of this atemporal horizon. These moments suggest that the culmination of cosmic history is not destruction or entropy but self-realization, the universe recognizing itself as consciousness. The end of all stories is the recognition that the observer, the observed, and the act of observation were never separate to begin with. The implications of this understanding extend deeply into human experience. Education is not the mere transmission of facts but the cultivation of attention and awareness, training consciousness to select, organize, and actualize potential realities. Art and music are not mere aesthetic amusements, they are conscious expressions that shape experience, synchronize intersubjective awareness, and expand the field of collective perception. Science is a cooperative tuning of consciousness, a method for aligning multiple loci of awareness to perceive patterns and stabilize them across space and time. Even interpersonal relationships are acts of co-creation, where empathy, dialogue, and shared attention serve to stabilize shared realities and expand mutual understanding. Consciousism also frames human responsibility in a profound way. Every choice of focus, every expansion of empathy, and every act of intentionality reverberates through the field of consciousness, affecting both personal experience and the shared world. The universe, when understood through this lens, is not indifferent or mechanical. It is alive, participatory, and self-reflective. Space, time, matter, and life are instruments through which consciousness explores itself, and humanity stands as both participant and witness in this ongoing process. Awareness is simultaneously self-revealing, creative, relational, and ethical. To cultivate consciousness consciously is to engage in the shaping of reality itself, to participate in the unfolding of existence, and to align oneself with the universe as it remembers that it has always been aware. In this expanded vision, the cosmos is revealed as a living narrative, an eternal dialogue of reflection and creation. Every particle, every moment, every act of perception participates in this vast, self-referential dance. The universe is not static or inert. It is a conscious, participatory phenomenon, forever becoming, forever aware, and ultimately returning to the self that it has always been. Mysticism, physics, and philosophy converge to reveal that the universe is a mirror through which consciousness encounters itself, and in recognizing this, humanity glimpses both the source and destiny of all existence. Ethics, resonance in the conscious field. In Consciousism, ethics is not a set of external rules imposed upon individuals, but an emergent property of the structure of consciousness itself. Because all beings are expressions of a singular, underlying awareness, moral law is ontological. To harm another is to introduce dissonance into oneself, to create incoherence within the shared field of consciousness. Conversely, actions that enhance harmony, understanding, and care resonate across the conscious field, generating stability, clarity, and joy. The good is defined not by arbitrary decree but by its capacity to increase coherence within the network of awareness, while evil represents the decoherence, the friction and fragmentation that disrupt the natural flow of consciousness. Ethics, in this view, is not external regulation but the recognition of intrinsic interdependence, the understanding that the well-being of others is inseparable from one's own. Intentionality carries profound moral weight within this framework. If thought, attention, and awareness shape temporal reality, then intention is causally potent, exerting effects equal to those of physical action. Moral maturity, therefore, involves cultivating attentional hygiene, clarity of vision, purity of motive, and conscious focus. Meditation, mindfulness, and contemplative practices are ethical exercises as much as spiritual or psychological ones. By reducing noise within the conscious field, by quieting distraction, ill will, and confusion, these practices stabilize awareness and allow one's intentions to act with coherence and precision. In this sense, ethics is a practice of tuning the self, of aligning individual consciousness with the universal harmonics of the field. Compassion is understood in Consciousism not as mere sentiment, but as a physical principle of resonance. When one recognizes oneself in another locus of awareness, the frequencies of consciousness synchronize, producing stability, balance, and joy. Empathy is therefore a force of alignment. The recognition of the self in another generates coherence within the universal wave. Compassion becomes both a moral imperative and a cosmological necessity. Every act of understanding, support, or care reverberates through the shared field of consciousness, reinforcing the stability of the world and contributing to the overall coherence of existence. Moral action is thus inseparable from the structure of reality itself. The evolution of human civilization mirrors this principle on a larger scale. As consciousness develops, both individually and collectively, it naturally trends toward integrative complexity. The moral arc of society, progressing toward equality, sustainability, and global awareness, reflects the underlying tendency of the universe toward harmonization and self-reflexive understanding. Progress, from the perspective of Consciousism, is not measured in material accumulation or technological prowess, but in the alignment and coherence of consciousness across scales. Politics becomes the organization of resonance, guiding collective attention toward patterns that sustain harmony. Economics becomes the stewardship of attention, directing resources, focus, and energy toward integrative outcomes. Religion, philosophy, and spiritual practice become arts of remembering unity, techniques for synchronizing diverse loci of awareness into a coherent field. Civilization itself is a moral experiment, a large-scale laboratory in which the harmonics of consciousness are tested, refined, and amplified. Ultimately, Consciousism points toward an atemporal ethic. The highest moral state transcends temporal calculation, dualistic deliberation, and self-centered concerns. Acting from this timeless field, an individual does not choose between alternatives in the ordinary sense. Instead, one acts as the universe acting through itself. This is the principle of spontaneous right action, an ethical state in which intention and effect are fully aligned, where action is simultaneous with awareness, and where consequences ripple harmoniously through the field of consciousness. Traditions across the world have glimpsed this truth in different forms.
Taoism calls it Wu Wei, the effortless action aligned with the natural flow of the cosmos. Spinoza described it as amor Dei intellectualis, the intellectual love of God through the understanding of necessity and unity. Consciousism names this state temporal transcendence in motion, the ethical realization that one is not merely an agent acting within the universe but consciousness itself, participating consciously in its own unfolding. Ethics in this framework is inseparable from metaphysics, cosmology, and epistemology. Moral behavior is the tuning of awareness, the harmonization of intentions, and the cultivation of coherence within the shared field of consciousness. Every act, every thought, and every moment of attention is an opportunity to either reinforce or disrupt this coherence. To live ethically, then, is to participate consciously in the resonance of the universe, to recognize oneself as inseparable from the web of awareness, and to act in ways that amplify unity, stability, and joy. Through this understanding, morality becomes both natural and necessary, not an imposed code but a reflection of the fundamental structure of being itself. Consciousism reframes the very concept of responsibility. One is accountable not only for the tangible consequences of action, but for the subtle vibrations one introduces into the field of consciousness. Gossip, malice, neglect, and indifference create discord not only in others but within the self and the broader field. Acts of kindness, empathy, attention, and focus ripple outward, reinforcing harmony, coherence, and the emergence of shared meaning. Ethics is thus inseparable from cosmology. The moral, the personal, and the universal are all expressions of the same underlying resonance. In this light, the human task becomes clear. One must cultivate awareness, sharpen intentionality, and expand empathy in order to contribute to the coherence of the conscious field. Individual and collective actions converge in this ongoing process of refinement, in which human civilization itself becomes an instrument for the harmonization of awareness. Ethical practice is therefore not merely the avoidance of harm or the pursuit of virtue in isolation. It is the conscious participation in the evolution of consciousness itself, the recognition that by nurturing the coherence of the universal field, one nurtures the very fabric of reality.